Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. My very special guest today is Peter Stojanovic. Great to have you here, Peter.
It's nice to be with you all.
And we go way back. We were reminiscing a little bit back to Avondale years when it was Avondale College. Now it's Avondale University.
Yeah.
And I think you graduated a little bit before me. I thought you and I were the same age, but you're a little bit older.
Yeah, just a tad. Yeah, no, I think I graduated in 79. The second time, the first time I did a certificate course and I think graduated in 75 for
Right.
that. It took me a little bit of time to actually get into Avondale, but that's a whole other story.
Another story, yeah.
Yeah, that's another story.
I think I started in 81 and graduated in 85 and took a couple of years off in between there.
But you must have been living nearby before you actually did the
Yes.
course, because I think we had the association with you.
That's right. Yeah, I was living there when I was younger in primary school. We went away for a few years, and then I came back in 1978 and did the rest of high school and then on to Avondale. Yeah. Well, it's great to have you on the program. Today we are going to be talking about domestic violence, among other things. And so we've titled the presentation, "An Adventist Supports DV Abuse Victims." And you said something interesting before we came on about that everyone is involved is a victim, even the perpetrators.
Well, and I think I certainly work with victims, and currently, but I've also worked for the last 17, 18 years with perpetrators, running men's behaviour change programs now. That's a task, working in that space for about 18 years, running weekly programs. There were times where we were running 4 programs.
Wow.
With about 70 men each week, in a fairly intense, involved behaviour change program. And the link between behaviour change and church and beliefs, they kind of go together. So it was like applying some of that changing process in this context, and that was revealing. It's revealing work. It's certainly.
I can imagine. And by saying that our title, An Adventist, we're not saying you're the only one, but
no.
But it's probably something that's in the news a lot at the moment, and it's probably something that Adventists could have a bit of a refresher course. And
I think it's a conversation that should be had more broadly in the community.
Yeah.
But in Christian communities, any other faith-based communities, including Adventists, because we know at times that incidences of domestic violence at times are higher in some instances within some of these more closed communities.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
One thing I've discovered doing these interviews, I think I'm over 300 interviews now.
Wow.
Particularly in the last 3.5 years, is as I've tried to work out what are some of the main Adventist kind of tenets or beliefs or unique identifiers, and I've kind of learned that every Adventist kind of has a bit of their own take on Adventism itself. And one great thing I've noticed about Adventists is they do a lot of good things for communities. They are quite focused, whether it's to proselytize or not. That's not the point. Everyone, can have mixed motives, but most people I've met, regardless of their whether they're kind of a conservative Adventist, fundamentalist, liberal, progressive, they all have a common concern and desire to help people and to help community. And I think that's a really good thing that Adventists bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
But I think it's also not just the Adventist community. I think it's more generalized to the Christian community.
Yeah.
And even other faith-based even Islam or even Buddhists. And
It's kind of a human thing, isn't it? We are
there is,
concerned about supporting
yes.
community.
So it's not that relationship with God, or
Exactly.
however that you experience leads you out into the community, because that's where the connection is. It's like if I'm a dad and I got children, if you love my children, you love me too.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think these are all God's children in some ways, and I think I see that as a bit of a motivator.
Exactly. And I really, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that in spite of whether you believe the 2,300 days and this turned into that and the investigative judgment at this exact moment and all that, or whether you believe a more liberal, progressive, Des Ford kind of teaching view, at the end of the day, Jesus is calling people to help each other.
Yeah, calling people into a relationship that results, and going on to that, in terms of those beliefs, that were part, and this was part of our journey at Avondale at the time. That was the time. Desford was my teacher, and
Interesting.
and we absolutely, for me, I am eternally grateful to that man, because not that I understood his theology, that I understood not his theology, but just theology. I'm not a theologian or an academic. Dr. Young once, I wrote an essay, and the question was, is the gospel, is our Acts, the book of Acts, is it a Tendenschrift? What's a Tendenschrift? A writing with a purpose. And I really got into this, and I developed this interpretation that Acts was actually used by Luke to establish the apostleship of Paul. Because if you look at Acts, whatever Peter did, Paul repeated, And it was fantastic. And I wrote it, I was so excited. I got the result and I got a 4 out of 10. And I said to Youngie, what is this stuff? Here I am, I've got this discovery, and you give me, because you're lucky you got a 4, mate, because I'm not an academic. But I did learn one thing, that the way that these people, Des and the like, lived out the gospel, to me, that was the biggest impact on me.
Yes, so true.
They lived that word, and that was the most powerful thing. And it still remains with me today, because I understood and I got to know the gospel. I got to know something of that was different to the way God, my father described God. I rejected that and adopted this, and I am forever grateful for that, because they lived that and drew me closer into that loving relationship and understanding of what God is like, and to a point, and our understanding is still developing and growing.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, the biggest impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a great impact. And a lot of people say that as well. That Des lived the Christian life. A lot of people criticized him and said, "Oh, so you're saying once saved, always saved." But he lived his life demonstrating that he did live a good exemplary life. He didn't believe that living of that life would get him into heaven or not a certain way, but he didn't say the law and living to the physics of health and wasn't to be cast aside.
No, but yeah, I mean, for me, look, when I got to Avondale, I left school at 6th grade. I had no high school at all, and I turned up to Avondale to do a Bachelor of Arts. Well, you know how that went. It took me 2 years to get in. So I'm always on the lower scale when it comes to these academics. But the way that he demonstrated respect or showed of a human life like mine, a little life. We were in class, there was 120 new students. Next week, he had the Orana, and he learned every face and attached a name. And every time you put up your hand, he knew your name. He would go past you, knows your name. me, I was flat out remembering my own name, you know. And that to me, on the ground, spoke the gospel. This person actually cared and noticed.
Exactly.
And that was significant.
Yeah.
Theology, the big black books, you know, I used to read them and half the time didn't understand any because I didn't have those questions. They were not questions for me.
Yeah.
As an Adventist, it was a little bit of a different to the North American journey, you know, and the disappointment and justification, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but when you had men like that, then Dr. Patrick, you know, Dr. Young, these guys, Eric Magnuson, Draper, these guys were on the ground.
Yeah.
And you felt that, you knew that. And this was the inspiration that came through in their understanding of what the gospel really meant. And Des was able to unpack that in a very significant way.
Yeah.
And that left a legacy on me.
Yeah, very powerful. I'm really lucky to have a dad that's like that. He just turned 92, and I'm struggling to remember if he and I have ever had a theological conversation. And yet he's got an IQ over 150. But he chose to live a life that was about family, helping community, doing little things around the place. I didn't realize for years he'd kind of disappear on a Sunday morning when I was growing up. And I said to Mum once after a few years, "Where does Dad go?" And he was running a gospel program for the folk down at Riverside. Remember on the waterfront down there at the Oro Creek? There was a place for those that people were mentally challenged and whatnot. He'd just go down there, never told anybody. He was often helping people with their tax in the retirement village. So what we're talking about is this kind of life where sometimes you can focus on all the theology and the academics and lose sight of actually what Jesus was talking about.
Let me tell you a quick example. I've got a house. I live on the Gold Coast and got a nice house, and there's a separate unit underneath, and I had a tenant there, you know, a couple. And I never used to, you know, never used to push religion on these people. Just live my life and we engage, but always in a respectful way and etc. One day he comes to me. His name was David. He says, you probably know I've got cancer. He says to me, is it okay if I die in the unit? You know, this is nearing death.
Wow.
And I'm going, yeah, look, you know, I mean, do what you need to do. I'm okay with that. The next day, he comes over and he says, listen, can you give me the last rites?
Wow.
I said, David, I'm not a priest. Go to your Catholic priest, you know, and talk to him, and he will do that for you. He goes, no. He says, look, I know you're some sort of religious person, and, you know, you do it for me. He says, do you use, you know, if you were to do that, do you use the holy water? I said, no, I actually don't. He goes, oh, that's good. He says, I don't believe in that. Can I say crap? He says, I don't believe in it. And I said, okay. And then he asked a big question. What's going to happen to me when I die? And he wants to know, and he's knocking on the door. And I said to him, David, you know, I don't open the heavens door or shut it. I know one thing, that he who gave you life loves you and loved you. He will decide your future, and you will be happy with that. He turns around and he says, I'm good with that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. 2 days later, I come home from work and the ambulance is here, police are here, he's dead in the unit. Wow. To me, it's not about the particular political or tribal camp. That's important to some other people, and in some other context, I guess there's importance in it. But for me, that's a ministry. Because I don't get to. I said I don't decide that. And I think that's sometime in our church life and in some of these denominational lives, we need to know that we are not allowing people in and throwing people out.
Yeah.
That belongs to another level, which is related to, I think, domestic violence. It's related to power and control that we think we possess over somebody else.
Now, Peter, we're just having a couple of messages, having a little trouble with sound and a bit of a delay. So what I'm going to do, I was going to give a quick plug for a new email address and book project that myself and Adrian Anderson have got going. So I'm going to just kick you out for a second, and can you re-click the link I gave you, and that should reboot the volume lag.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I will just give this book a bit of a plug, and I'll kick you out. But we're talking to Peter Stojanovic, and we will be back very soon, hopefully with a corrected.
All right, kick me out.
Sorry about that, everyone. There's a little bit of a delay and some volume issues, but we'll get right onto that. And Peter will be back in a moment. But I did want to give a plug for a new thing that my good friend Adrian Anderson and myself are doing. We have got a bunch of books. Not just this one, lots and lots of different books that we have gathered over the last 3.5 years. And I'll just bring Peter back in. And I think that's going to be better. So I was just saying there, Peter, that a friend of mine and I, over the last 3.5 years, have been collecting many, many books. Some are quite rare. So we've got some Walter Ray White Lie. I think there's one left, but they're like about $150. They're really rare, some of them, and some of them aren't. And our good friend Robert Lindbeck donated to me maybe 50 to 100 of these books. It's called Who Watches, Who Cares? Misadventures in Stewardship. This is kind of the politics and the financial side of the church that sometimes people don't totally want to get into, but as this book reveals, it's not to tear down the church. It's by being aware of this loop of systemic financial, I guess, basically bad fiduciary care keeps on going. And so this book reveals the systems that have been in play that cause this endless loss of millions of dollars. So it's Who Watches, Who Cares? And we've got an email address. If you want to buy a copy, it's $20 plus postage and handing. So in America, it's probably going to add another 20. But it's
who gets that money?
And so that all that money.
I'm only kidding.
Well, we should do a percentage goes to you and your DV work.
But you know what? When it comes to money, it's like family. You know, where there's a will, there's a relative, and you discover people's view of money and possession. You know what they really turned on by when it comes to those kinds of situations. So it doesn't surprise me, because these people, you know, where there's money and power, there is the possibility to abuse, and it goes from the Vatican, and you can go to, well, jeepers, you just go into the government spaces, and you look at wastage. So it's kind of like it's the power.
Yeah. Once people have power, it corrupts. My dad used to say, "Power corrupts," and absolute
power corrupts absolutely.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah, something like that.
Yes, that's the line.
And so Adventists aren't just unique to it, but this book outlines some of the unique ways that of how Adventism is structured. Like you mentioned, that sometimes the more closed kind of denominations have more problems with domestic violence. They also have more problems with finances too. So this book,
absolutely.
Douglas Hackelman, just has it's a loving book. He loves the church, and he's trying to help it. So we've got that available, $20. Postage and handling. The email address there is SDAQ&A@gmail.com. That goes direct to Adrian. Please only send inquiries about book sales there. It's not a general get in touch with us kind of channel. Now, Peter, I fixed the delay and then I pressed another button and it came back. So I'm going to one more time just quickly boot you and come straight back in, and we'll be fine for the rest of the program then. So so contact Adrian there for that incredible book. I think we've got 20, 50, 100 copies, not sure. And love to have you get a copy of that. And we've got Peter back. Awesome. Now, Peter, just one question that's come through. I'll bring it up first, and then we're going to dive into some of your thoughts on how you can help people that have been abused by domestic violence. Moto Sapien asks, where is it? He says, Peter, how effective do you find DV reform to be? So this was when you were mentioning that you run men's groups and you're trying to help the perpetrators to change their patterns of behavior. So his question's relating to that. Can you answer that? And then we'll go to back to topic.
That's such a relevant question. It's such a common question that is actually put to us. I once went to a woman's refuge, and I came with the abusers, right? And I would ask these women who are hiding with their children, what do you want to know from me? What is the question you want to ask me of he who works with the perpetrators of domestic violence? And you know what they wanted to know? Will they change? How effective is this change? I said to them, I said, look, let me give you the bad news, and it's good news as well. They don't change.
Wow.
You know, while you hope for change, spending your life, and you are not seeing or you are not making decisions based on what is. You're basing your decision on what you hope it will be. Hope is not your friend. Let me put it to you like this. He is as he is.
Wow.
Will he change? He has that opportunity of change. And it only begins to happen when we, like that book, when we face the reality of what's going on, when our eyes are open. You know, when we stop minimizing, denying, and blaming. They are the three key terms in this context of change. When we minimize, deny, or blame, we are condemned to repeat. You don't learn anything, as long as you're minimizing, denying, and blaming. So and this is the biggest issue in working with men, getting them move off that station of minimizing, denying, and blaming, and move them into learning and seeing the world from the perspective of the other. And if somebody says, hey, and if they're going to change, the change is that we begin to see, when they begin to see the world of the other, when they move it away from them, because it's all about them, when they move to begin to understand and seek to understand what's the impact my behavior is having on another human being, and in this instance, you know, the wife and the mother and etc. That's the beginning of change. That's the price. That's the best way for me to describe it. In terms of effectiveness, what are the numbers? How can anybody evaluate prevention? How can anybody decision that you make, or a choice, or a small decision, the kind of impact it's going to have on you down the track? This is the difficulty in gauging, will they change? We have seen change. I have met people stop me in the street. I was post office the other day and just walking in and out, and this guy goes, hey. Do you remember me? I said, not really. He goes, I was in one of your groups. And he said, you know what? I just want to tell you that has been the best experience of my life. My life looks different. No, I would not know that at the time. But these are the things that you can pick up. People change. I've changed. I moved my dial, but when I moved off minimizing my behavior, stop blaming other people for my behavior, and denying my behavior, change is possible.
It's a little bit like the 12 steps, where you have to accept who you are, change what you can, but also stop denying that you've got a problem.
Well, isn't the acceptance of the gospel any different? It's exactly that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You come to, I used to love that line in church. I always used to rebel against it in church when they say, "You must come to God as you are. Come as you are." That was always like a ludicrous statement to me. I'm thinking, can you come to God as you are not? Can you kind of like, let me come as I'm not?
Yeah.
It's like that idea when we were courting, we didn't bring our real self into that space.
Yeah.
We brought who we thought they wanted us to be.
Yeah.
The unmasking comes afterwards. And there we go. Now I know who you are. And that, well, because that's the issue. So I think in all of our lives, if we're going to be different and make a difference, we have to do things differently. That's what I think. So yeah, do they change? Yes, but we don't often know. We have also repeat offenders. There was one guy in the group. He was doing the group. This was his fourth time, the circuit. So when he came for the fifth time, I said, "Hey, buddy, you may need to talk. I think you're a very slow learner. There is some blockage somewhere. Are you up for this? I mean, you enjoying this? You must love this. Well, I hate this stuff, I did. Well, what you need to catch another train, denying and blaming, and then focus on. And I think that's. And the other thing about men, I'm drifting, I know, and maybe that's not the question.
No, it's good.
But I think the other thing that is so powerful in this space, that men speak to us from their intent. They say, "By my intention was, my intention is, I never intended this to happen." And we would say to them, "Listen, buddy, nobody benefits out of your intent. It's like that James story, my intention is that you not be cold or hungry, but you don't open the tin of soup or anything. You don't do." People don't benefit from our intent.
No.
The people that you live with don't benefit from your good wishes for them.
Yeah.
They live in the effect. And your question has to be, what is the effect?
Yes.
What is the effect that I am having on them? So a relationship question, probably the best relationship question, is, what's it been like for you living with me this week? Is a really nice question when we ask our wife, our partner, what's it been like for you living with me? And if there is a safe place for that answer to come, you learn. And you begin to see what you don't see. That's deepening that respectful relationship. That's where the non-violence is. That's where that lack is, in that space, in that kind of question. But when you are telling them what you are like and you define that, or you permission yourself to define their life, what it's like for them in your space, I think that's a different place that you put yourself. How do you get to define their life? Who gives you that job? So sometimes the men will say this, and this is they would go, Well, you keep saying men, and why does she then poke the bear? If she was afraid, why is she poking the bear? That's a pretty good question. If she's afraid, why is she poking the bear? And then I ask them, and I say to them, okay, but how do you get to be the bear? Who permissions you to be the bear? That people should not poke. How do you get that job?
Yes.
Because that places you. So going back to that issue, the bigger picture, and that's in some ways the bigger picture. Women live in a different world to men, and we need to realize that. Because if I'm walking the street at night at 7 o'clock, and she is walking the street alone at night at 7 o'clock, we're not walking in the same world. Her fears are different. Some random guy's going to come and jump and, intimidate me and do all sorts of horrible things, right? As a man, I walk, and if I have a fear, I might fear that men will do that. And I think at times we need to understand that we are equal, but our worlds are different. Our worlds are different as a consequence. It's like, and I have a little Toyota car and a big semi-trailer parked beside me. We share the road, but we're not equal. It's intimidating watching that, what is possible. And maybe just one more comment about that is you got, for example, all men that we interview prior to these programs, the interview starts like this. My situation is different. I'm not like all the others. Mine is different. I'm actually the victim of her abuse. Now, every one of them. Now, these guys are mandated by the courts. These guys are certified. Some of them have done jail time for DV offending and hurting and injuring, let alone the emotional stuff and the controlling behaviors and all of that. That's a whole other level. So they start off and they say, hey, it's different, because, okay, so, and the other thing is, as men, we have no one to talk to because we feel shame. And I say to him, well, jeepers, you're not doing a good job, are you? You're not being accurate to that description because that's the first thing you're telling me. That's the first story you're telling me, that you're the victim. But I said, okay, when she is slapping you around, buddy, what's your script? What are you saying to yourself? In your head, what are you saying? You know what you're saying? You're saying, listen, woman, don't get me fired up, because if I get fired up, I can throw you over the house. You don't sit in fear for your life. We never justify women's behavior. Women's behaviors and violent, abusive behaviors are never useful in a loving, caring relationship. They don't fit into that spot. So we never promote that. But we tell men, we need to hear that. We need to understand the difference, and it is different. In one group where I was, and I went to this place, and they were talking about fathers killing children and mothers killing children, and they would say, well, mothers kill children. And there are examples of that. But the reason is different. And I think we need to understand that if we're going to work with people, we've got to understand some of these structural differences. But, well, you can't change the outside world. When people come into the counselling room to see me, I give them this. I said, the world you left, when you came into this place and you shut the door, the world you left will greet you when you go out again. When you open the door and you're leaving, it's the same world. Nothing's changed. They're not changing because you're here. You can't change them from here. You change. You're back and repeat, and it's the same issue. So for us in this conversation is always that what I need to do, and I make a difference in the world I live, not by what other people do, but what I actually do. And to these men, I would say, you have a world to influence. I don't want to hear about Trump or anybody else. I want to talk about everybody else because they see, to even this church thing, we see the faults of the others, and Jesus tells us that. We see it clearly. We see the little specks. The most amazing experience I have with these men, you're locked in for 2.5 hours, 16 of them. There's a male and a female facilitator, and I often reflect on what's it like for her. Very different. I'm always amazed how they are able to dismantle, articulate, see the nuances of domestic violence in other people, in men.
Yeah.
We watch a video, we watch an example. They deconstruct it to perfection, but they don't see their own.
Wow, boy.
They don't see their own. And the whole task, the beliefs, the script in your own head, that is you. And unless we are prepared to do that individual work, unless I am prepared to be challenged and look at my own behavior and the effect I'm having on other people, I will continue to be who I am. And change will not happen. Connection I have, and forever grateful for going to Avondale and learning the gospel, because that's the gospel. Jesus says this to me. You know, after the resurrection, and he's talking about, going away, and Peter's following. Somebody else is coming. I think it was John, and he's going, "Hey, what about him?" And Jesus says, "Hey, leave him be. You know, if I want him to be around, what's that to you? You come after me. You come with me." And I think this is the same. It's not what happens in other families or other households, in what other relationships I have to explore. And I would come home and I had to reflect, what kind of individual am I? What kind of man am I in the context of this relationship? And am I exercising power over? And who gave me that right? Or am I in a relationship where I'm sharing life and see what I don't see at the time? And I don't always see very clearly what it's like for them. So that's a bit of that.
Yeah, boy, that's fascinating. That you got some really good comments through there. Moto Sapien said, "Oh, Peter S. Wow, I'm going to text that to my wife right now." Something you'd said a bit earlier. He also
that question about what's it like for you living with?
Yeah, and he also said, "I'd be interested in the offender's view of God. I imagine they see God as ruling with an iron fist, and they act like the God they follow. Is that possible?" Oh, and can you come a bit closer to the mic as well?
Sure. Yeah. Is that better?
I think so.
I mean, the thing about that, they see themselves as God. They sit in a position of rule makers and decision makers. They take the position that doesn't belong to them, and I think that's the problem. Simon and Garfunkel, they sing a song, "I'd rather be a hammer than a nail."
Yeah.
I'd rather be in a position of power than not.
Yeah.
But we don't think about that at times, and then some people even turn to the scriptures and use that as a justification of control, the head of the household and all of that. But they neglect the weightier matters of the law. They neglect the selfless service that Jesus was, the head of the church, actually was. We all have learning to do in this space. And even though we are not, people say, "Oh, I'm not violent." and sometimes we define domestic violence or abusive behavior as physical violence. But we got to understand one thing, that every human being is also, but they're also an emotional person. And the emotional being is as real as the physical. The emotional person can be injured, abused, damaged, wounded, hurt, poisoned. They can be destroyed. Now, you know people, we all know people who emotionally they don't function. We know people who are physically not, full kit, and yet, so when we look at this aspect of control, and it's not just the physical, it's not just the bruises. There used to be a saying in school when I was a kid: sticks and stones will break my bones, but words or names will never. Have you heard that?
Yeah,
it's a fairly common statement.
Yeah.
Because that's so untrue.
Yeah, I know.
Because the bruises heal, but the words, the emotional recovery. So when we look at this aspect of control and domestic, it's not just this pushing, shoving, hitting, and fist bumping or bruising and black eyes and horrible as it is, but that's not the full picture. What is the experience with? Is the question. And if going back to that respect, we were talking before with Desmond Ford. Now, he didn't, I don't know why he did it, but he doesn't go, I'm going to be respectful today to this person or that. But he is respectful, but it's not it comes from a place of that, I think. So it's not me being respectful. I'm going to be respectful today. But when I value another human being, I am doing something significant that gives the other person that value of sustenance to breathe and to live life that we all have the privilege of. That is, you look at the universe and you think, oh my goodness, where are we? Sometimes people say, where do you live? I live in Coolangatta, in Queensland, Australia, southern, part of the world, the south world. I live on the Earth, planet Earth, in our solar system, and I live in the Milky Way amongst billions of other galaxies. What's my address? That's where we live. And I think being respectful, valuing, comes in more than just physical injuries. But it's that inner being, the kind of parts that at times we don't see. Lots of people suffer in silence, or they suffering in church, or in any group of people, even individuals. When you get the chance sometimes and people open up and they open their story and you go, oh my goodness. You hear pain, you hear experiences, childhood issues, so it's a big journey. Some of the men will say, yes, but I am like this because bringing. And I love that question and say, okay, listen, my friend, what are you asking? With what you have said, what are you asking for? Are you asking for a green card for abusive behavior? That's been your experience. So what are you asking for? Did you permission yourself to continue that? No. Nobody should. You shouldn't ask for that, because out of all the people in the world, you know how horrible that is. Don't ask for that. Nobody should give you that permission. Whatever excuse, and this is the other thing when men talk about this, they always contextualize it and they give the reasons why they did what they did, because what else could I have done? It's kind of like everything's justified. That's that minimization, denial, and blame all over again. And I say to these guys, I said, listen, experience and my experience in childhood experience are different. And it might be easier for me to be more respectful and thoughtful and less abusive because of my upbringing. I have an easier journey. But let me also tell you, your journey is maybe a little bit more complicated and difficult because you have other limitations. But let me tell you, both of us need to do the work. Because I have the same journey as you, from being disrespectful, thoughtless, selfish, self-centered individual, into caring, compassionate, thoughtful, empathetic human being.
Mm.
I have a journey too. I wasn't born into that. It's not a matter of genetics. I also love the way that they would quote scripture. Somebody mentioned they actually quote scripture, and the scripture they often quote is, it says, "Can a leopard change its spots? A leopard can't change its spots." And I love it when they throw that out, because I know the scripture. And I said to them, listen, spots. Leopard can't change its spots. That's genetics.
Mm-hmm.
The color of your eyes, the ears you have, the shape of the hair that you have, I love your hair, that you have or don't have, the length of your hands and fingernails and all of that is genetics. But we're not asking you to change your genes. We're asking you how you use your spots, how you use this genetic being you are, how that is applied and you use it. That's a learned behavior. That's not in the genes. That's a learned behavior. And therefore, take it on board.
Mm.
I'll tell you one more story. Probably in all of my working as an ex-pastor in a secular humanist setting as a counsellor. I was counselling, and one day this woman comes in. She was a very attractive woman, in her 30s, 32, 5 something. And she comes in. She doesn't know I'm a minister because I'm working there just as a counsellor, not religious counselling, just counsellor. And she starts telling me her story and she can get to home. And, alcohol-fueled abusiveness, horrendous for the last 15 years. And she's got 2 children. And the children are now about 8 and 12. And I asked her a question. I said, why do you stay? Why are you still with this man? Now, the question in some counts, but the setting was right for that question. So why do you stay? And she says, you wouldn't understand. Well, I said, try me, maybe I could understand. She says, look, I'm a Christian. Nah, you wouldn't understand. No, I said, please tell me. Why do you stay? And maybe I could understand, who knows, but give me a go at least. And then she says, in my church, I believe God wants to use me to bring him into repentance. I said, oh, okay. And that's the main reason why you are in this abusive relationship, which is horrific. Yeah. I said, let me ask you a question. In your religion, hasn't somebody already died for the salvation of your husband? Where do you get the idea that God requires another human sacrifice in saving?
Mm.
Her jaw dropped on the floor. She was stunned. How is it that you believe that you've got to give up your life for repentance thing because somebody has already died for him.
It's invalidating the whole process of atonement at the cross.
There it is right there. And I said, in your religion, doesn't God redeem the oppressed people? If his people are in oppression or in prison, he is sending the Calvary to kind of redeem them. How do you get to the point that God's a jailer? It's like keeping you in prison in suffering. And by the way, I've heard those stories in church as well, and I hate every one of them, because for every one of those that might come to repentance, I'll tell you 100 who haven't. And the woman and their horrific lives and given up their lives for no benefit to anyone. While his responsibility of his conduct and salvation, it's that individual thing. It's the way that I connect. Nobody can do that for me. Anyway, this woman was absolutely floored by this. So she goes, "Thank you. I know what I need to do." So she leaves. And she comes back. She says, "Oh, I just want to see you again." I said, "Tell me what's been going on. I'm like curious." She says, "My life is very different now." I said, "Well, tell me about it." He's off the drink. He's got himself into change mode big time. You know why? Because when she went home, she said, "I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm your partner. I want to share life, not save you. That's your work. I'm out of here." And the person's world changed. He didn't anymore excuse and put responsibility of his behavior on somebody else. He turned around. Now, that's 4 weeks, and he's gone into the process of, change, and things improved for them in that period. I don't know what happened afterwards, but the reality of that message, and I think it's the same for us. We don't get saved through the church. You don't get saved through belonging to a community or because you're living with this family or that family. No, it is your relationship with God, your behavior. And this is the way I would approach, and I approach it when I talk to these men. Your behavior is your responsibility. And they go, "Oh, mate, you're just blaming us." I said, "Dude, how am I blaming you when I'm saying that your behavior is your responsibility?"
Yeah.
How am I blaming you? I'm saying your behavior is it's your freedom ticket, buddy. She doesn't determine your life. She doesn't have a button that she regulates good behavior, bad behavior on your part. And you are free to be the kind of human being you want to be. That's your freedom. You cut the button pushing stuff. How don't you? And it takes a bit of time for them to see that shift. Because we would also say and do say, unless you own your story, you can't write its ending. If you don't own somebody else is writing it for you. Somebody else will write it. And we are not born as human beings. This is not the intent that God has for us. In the life we have, we are to make it work and count. We need to look after our own backyard and make it count and work. But when I go into other people's yards to fix it for them, the controller. How do I get to decide what they need to do and neglect my stuff?
That personal responsibility is so important. Even and some studies show that even there is some genetic predisposition to violence, and even if that's the case, your point still stands because you are still ultimately responsible for your behavior.
You're the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
I thought, look, I don't know how much I want to reveal of this, but hey, I used to have an iron bar in the car. You know, people how to drive and how to be respectful drivers by waving the iron bar and threaten to smash their windows. And I've hit people as well. This would be a professional boxer. And, you know, I was one of those people with my intent, but my intent was to teach people to drive respectfully, safely.
Your intention was good,
Until
but
one day,
the outcome
but
wasn't.
the effect was,
The effect wasn't.
until one day, I had to talk to myself. I said, listen to yourself. Who gave you this job that you're the instructor of what happens on the roads? Where do you get that right from? Stop. I put the iron bar away. I stopped being a teacher, and it became the kind of driver that I expect other people to drive on the road. Everybody is driving improved. Everybody was better. I didn't look out for the horrors, you know. I just paid attention.
You've just raised a couple of really interesting, nuanced points there. Like abuse, as you mentioned, it doesn't have to be domestic violence or violence. It can be emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, but the kind of abuse that if you're helping people, so this is my first point, if you're helping people who suffer from this problem, unless you've experienced it yourself, you're not really of much use to them. When I used to teach guitar, unless I can play guitar myself, I can't really pass on information. So, you know, unless you've experienced what you're imparting knowledge, you know, so I'm glad you were honest there and shared that, you know, you had the bar in the car, but you were able to go, okay, I've got this and I'm going to teach people. And you yourself were able to shift that. And therefore you have a valid experience and process to share with those who have that problem. The other thing I wanted to raise,
just before you get off that, because it's like people know that you understand, and you don't understand until you understand.
Exactly.
And people know when you are just pretending understanding and you know, that sort of stuff, or that you actually understand.
Exactly.
And I think the experience, they see
your authenticity.
They see it. Sorry,
No, that's a good, you needed to say that. That's an important little caveat to what you were saying. People can smell fake a mile away, especially people that are involved with abusing others. They're masters of seeing. So the other thing I wanted to say, we chatted, I can't remember if it was on the show or off air before the show, where certain suppression movements, denominations, religions that are leaning to that over control can have higher levels of domestic abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse happen within their ranks. And what you said there about the bashing stick, if a church itself feels like it is responsible for controlling its people, suppressing people, scripting its message, therefore it makes sense to that it in itself is an entity that fosters and encourages that kind of behavior and dishes out that kind of behavior. So, for example,
I hear you're going.
Just finish the thread. So therefore, is it true that some denominations, and maybe Adventism, because of its quite controlling theology and politics, is it true that there might be more domestic violence within it? And does it in its very nature cause it? I remember, a friend of mine in the early 80s was in a band, and he was playing a little bit more kind of contemporary music, and the organizer or someone in the audience came up and pulled the plug out. So in that moment, there was violence, there was emotional abuse, there was spiritual abuse, all perpetrated from an ideology that wanted to control how its members behaved. So I want you to thoughts on that. Does Adventism, by
Look,
nature of its kind of over controlling political and theological stance, does it contribute to maybe the growth of more domestic violence, emotional violence, spiritual abuse than a more benign Protestant religion?
there's no such thing. The point about all of this, there's you can put the name Adventism, whatever name you want to give it. The reality is the power. Wherever there is power, the potential for control is that. In our explanation of power and control, we use a triangle. And who sits at the top and who sits at the bottom? Now, people sit at the top who got the power. And the people at the bottom are the ones who are oppressed and they're pushing up. But then there's the resistance of that. And this is where all of this is. But can I put you in terms of the church itself?
The Adventist
I think
church.
there is a Adventist church. I think there is a problem for us when we see the church or talk about the church as not us who are there, but we see the church as administrators and power and whatever that is. Can I just say to you that the reality is I am the church. I am part of this body of Christ, and my conduct in my seat, when I'm sitting next to or behind a noisy child who's having difficulty, then my response is the church's response. Most people that leave church don't leave church because of that reason. There are some do, but most leave because they didn't experience in the seat next to them or in front of them or behind them in having being the kind of church that I want the church to be. Because the reality is I am the church. When I sit in that pew, I'm the church.
But
I am the body of Christ.
Can't the ideology foster that kind of the church from a grassroots level? Like, for
But that's
example,
the power thing. That's
when I was 8 or 9, along with probably 2 million other Adventists my age, your age, maybe as well. We were taught about the time of trouble and the end time and the Sunday law and running to the hills and we're going to betray our parents and that fear. If you went with the idea of, hey, we are the church, that's going to encourage more people that are inclined to highlight that sort of abuse than a church that's more benign. Since 1983, I've been playing music in all different denominations, and no other denomination other than Adventists share the same kind of suppression that musicians within Adventism have had. It's a unique thing. So if it's we are the church, I'm just saying, doesn't the church itself have some kind of mechanism at play that sometimes fosters an elevation of we the people doing bad things?
Look, you're a visitor. We invited you to do a song service here for us and you're a visitor and you're an outsider to us. The week before you come, we tell the church we've got to visit behavior. We've got to put there are certain topics we won't discuss. There are certain things we won't bring out. You as a visitor going around to these other churches, you got the ad, and everybody does this. You got the window, the display. But when you go underneath and you spend a bit of time, and I've spent time at Southport, and this was probably one of the successes for me in the ministry, was you get this a church community that was there for years. We sold the church, shifted them into a uniting church for about 4 years while we built and relocated and built a bigger church, in another venue without losing people. And I had a very close relationship with the minister of the Uniting Church, who knew Adventists and used to receive the Record magazine, not the Record, the Ministry magazine. And he and I became good friends. And he began to talk to me about my church, how he experienced Adventism. And he was very favorably, because one time he asked me a question, where are you going to put me in the end times? Where are you assigning me around this issue of Sunday and Sabbath and all that sort of stuff? And so I had to answer the question for him. I said, dude, that's not my job to assign you, I'm not the assigner, somebody else does that. And he had a love of the gospel because he was a Catholic. He started off as a Catholic, but because of child abuse that he didn't remain there, he became a Uniting Church minister and he was transitioning. And I invited him to preach in our church. He preached. I preached in his church, on a Sunday. We'd sort of change. It was a beautiful experience for both the Adventist community that stayed there because they saw ones who care about the gospel and who care about God and who, there are other people like that. It was a very interesting experience. But what I'm saying is this, that abusive element doesn't come because of Adventism. It comes because of power. And whenever people you have power, and theology is power, or some doctrinal interpretations of power, or money is the same, saints are the same, but I've found that once you get past the window, once you get past the window, the reality, and this was amazing to me, that the realities of this there's a similar struggle, there's a similar issue.
I must have heard you wrong. I thought you said that some denominations foster more DV than others.
The more look, closed or insulated they are, that's going to be the consequences, because the eyes are shifting away. It's like the question: if you knew you were not going to be caught and you wouldn't be found out, what would you be doing or not doing? If you had the confidence you're not going to be caught, would you steal? Would you drive fast? What would you do? That's the reality. The rest is external pressure because of fines and the external behavior. So the thing is that at times when we are closed off more or distrust more of other people, you become more insular, and therefore what happens behind closed doors happens behind closed doors, because it's almost like you feel people are protecting that, because they're protecting the image of and that happens. It happens with child abuse. It happens in that I talk about these DV offenders. You know what they say? What happens behind closed doors is no one's business. I said, really, dude? Are you telling me that you can take another human being and put them behind a closed door and do with them what you want, when you want, and how you want it? Are you telling me that? Is this your right? Where do you get that from? And I think the aspect of the church's structure, and everybody's got their territory, their club, their tribalism. Tribalism is, you go to Africa. I've been to Papua New Guinea. There are hundreds of different tribes there. You can't go. It's protection racket. So when people become, so it's not unique to us.
It's power, like you're saying, it's power. Yeah. So do you think, though, like, for example, and I'm not drilling down, this is just me asking to learn.
No.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think you're right. I just noticed when I've been doing this work of scrutinizing the Adventist church, as I've looked at other channels, you've got like former Mormon kind of channels, former Adventist, former Jehovah's Witness, but there's no former Methodist or former Presbyterian. And all the people that are speaking into the former Mormon, Adventist, and JWs are speaking highly, are speaking a lot about their concerns that Adventism, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses do fall into this closed category. So I'm not challenging that. I'm just saying
I hear that.
From your perspective, you're saying that Adventism doesn't fall into that. Would that mean that these people have just got it wrong, that they're experiencing more abuse from Adventism than the average benign Methodist church?
Look, I don't think that anybody who has power is benign. I don't think it's the application of it, and even it's even in that masculinity. You know, there's toxic masculinity. Now we can go into that space. Am I toxic because I'm
And you
masculine?
find that everywhere, don't you? You find that from Adventist to Salvation Army.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And that's what I'm trying to find out. Are there religions
that are more...
The stats show more domestic violence, more spiritual abuse, more emotional abuse? Are there stats?
I don't know that this... Well, the stats don't... And hey, dude, I'm not a theologian or a statistician, you know. I don't do that sort of stuff a lot.
Me either.
You know, I'm not big into that. But the thing is true, though, that the stats say that conservative, more closed communities, because they are more closed, some of this is perpetuated because it's not uncovered. But then again, if you look at the stats now, you know, for example, the Catholic Church has been blasted for being the pedophile people, right? The priests.
But the reality...
But the reality is, well, look at the schools, look at communism, look at the Buddhists, look at the any number, because wherever people are, we're not much different to other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the requirement of that respectfulness, the requirement for that is so... I think theology has something to do with it. You know, this idea of living in fear and running to the hills. And I lived next door to an SDA guy he actually had a knapsack and his bush running shoes and
ready to go,
and cans ready to go when the time came.
I don't know if you saw this book when you were young. It came out when my generation, your generation, and that scared the heck out of us. Look, what you're saying...
Absolutely, but you know, problem, maybe just a theological term. You know, this view of this kind of end time events and that prophetic interpretation that was presented to me was not helpful to me. And I'll take just quickly, because I had this outline: Sunday laws, popes, uniting, this inclusion, running away, stuff. And I would listen to this, and then I would go, I like the world. I'm like I left school when I was 13. I grew up with men in the meatworks, right? Knew how to fight, learn how to smoke, learn how to do all sorts of things, you know. But I also felt I have to watch the signs and make sure that when I see... Because I wanted the world and heaven. I'm a greedy person. I wanted both. I didn't want to miss out. This is my chance to life. I wanted to experience it all. So I would be cruising outside, but looking for the signs which were articulated by various evangelists at different intensities and reasoning. And I would go, I don't see that happening. I have time. And I was in church. I was a youth leader in church with that kind of belief. Hypocrite numero uno. And then there was a preacher that came, Peter Yoside. I'll mention his name. he articulated the gospel, but the power of the gospel in bringing about change through prayer. He preached, I'm leading the program. I'm a youth. I said, Peter, this is what I need. This hypocrisy that some of these historistic interpretations were doing me in, because they were perpetuating or encouraging my double timing. And I was not alone. Because there are still plenty of people who are to become Christians and live the Christian life, you know. Anyway, then we had a prayer meeting and etc. and my life changed, and that's where I went to college and all that sort of stuff, you know, when I kind of rejected. But the other one that was helpful to me, strange as it might seem, was Ellen White. This guy, you remember the guy I told you with the testimonies to the church written in Croatian and Serbian, whatever, and he gave me these copies, and I began to read the testimonies to the church. And what Ellen White articulated and did for me, she frightened the living daylights out of me, because she exposed my hypocrisy of spirituality. I saw as the version of spirituality that I had was nowhere near to the spirituality that she had or was asking people to have. And that created the dilemma for me, because in my duality, in my shallowness, I felt I could make it into heaven and I could be saved and, you know, cruise in the charm and, you know, we can get there. She busted that myth. And I felt my lostness. And that's when Jesus became to me real. And that experience of offloading my sin and having that encounter, and then going to Avondale and having that lived and confirmed, was to me the you know. So I just say to people, you know, and if we look at some of these interpretations, I say to people, hey, dude, I'm preaching actually tomorrow on the you know, the workers in the vineyard, and it's a very interesting line. I've never heard other people preach it in this way. You know, the idea that he goes in the morning, employs the trees to go, then he goes, you know, 3 hours later, then he goes at midday, then he goes 1 hour before the end, and then they all receive the money, and starts with the last, and the first guy's all upset because, where's my 12 denarii, you know, and you've got this misunderstanding. And then, but the take that I will take to the church tomorrow is this. He grumbled in the vineyard from 6 o'clock in the morning till at night, and he was made equal with the guy who was there for an hour, and he got the same pay. Now, let's go into their experience. The guy in the morning, when he got the job, he was as happy as. He was in the vineyard happy as. He's got a full day's wage. He'll be able to. He's dancing, pleased that he's got the job. The guy who's waiting for the job, he's suffering all day long. How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to go? Nobody's there to employ me. So his life is one of suffering. The end comes and he gets this reward. But the 12 hours of it is very different for the guy who worked for that hour. And I think it's the same for us. Sometimes we ask the question, has all this been worthwhile, being a Christian, being in the church, being a Seventh-day Adventist, you know? Is this people who left the church say, was Avondale a bad experience for them? And you know what's interesting? Most of them that I talk to say, no, it actually hasn't. There's stuff that they can hold onto. So I think in the way that we live life, in our present moment, is our blessing. I don't wait for the end. I want the end to be. I'm the prophetic interpretations or prophetic fulfillments. Jesus can come for me now. I'm done. I'm happy as. Let's go.
But you're realistic as well.
I'm good. I'm good to go. But the thing is, the way we live, and I think even in our families, around this domestic violence and abusive behavior, the way they experience life, that they live life with me now. What's going to happen next year? I preached a sermon once called the year 3000. Are you going to live differently if you knew Jesus was coming in year 3000? Does it make a difference to you? Why? If you have a love relationship who is the Savior of our souls, who unburdens us and opens our eyes to ourselves and to other people, and the beauty and the power of compassion and forgiveness and engagement, there's a blessing. I'm already in heaven. I'm already living that. That's the bit I learned at Avondale. That's the that I did. And I try and apply it. Not try, I have to live it. In the house, in the day, when I come home.
I often say to people, I never was an Adventist. I was an Avondalist. Because I was there as a little boy, and then growing through that era with Des Ford, Norm Young, Arthur Patrick, all these guys. Eric Magnuson was my neighbour. I grew up with Dr. Lindsay's kids, and it was a very lovely experience. I'm a super fan of Avondale. Hey, do you believe Joseph Smith was a false prophet?
I had once people come to me, Mormons coming along, and the prayer was, let's have a prayer. Would you have a prayer with us? And the prayer would run like this: that God reveals to me that Joseph Smith was a true prophet. And I said, hang on a minute. This is a psychological, in other words, I'm assuming that he is true, and I'm now praying for confirmation, true, and I'm praying for the confirmation of that. I said, why don't we pray, is Joseph Smith a false prophet? Please reveal to me that Joseph Smith is a false prophet.
Yeah.
Your relationship through that prayer is going to be different. Whether truth or not, in terms of Ellen White, for example, for me, I've helped people. Desmond Ford helped me with Ellen White. And the way that it helped me was this. She said of herself, and that's a quote I always take, I'm a lesser light leading men to the greater light. She says to me as a preacher, preach the word, preach the gospel. One day I was in a church and this super efficient SDA approached me and he says, Ellen White. I said, you know why? Because I listened to what she said. She says to me, preach the word. What do you want me to do? Read her books? No. She says, my works are the lesser light leading men to the greater light. What do you want me to do? You need to be obedient to her. And I think the authenticity, if there is an authenticity, is that line, he must increase and I must decrease. Soon as a prophet, a leader, gathers and they become the center, that's not doing the prophets a service, and that's not their work anyway. And I think, and if you look at the work of the prophets in the Old Testament, sheep, God says, my people are lost, go and leave your sheep, go and talk to them, get them back to me. He goes there, blah, 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 as a talk, they go back to him, he goes back to the sheep. John the Baptist, the Bible says, the greatest of all, born of women, is John the Baptist. I'm not him. I'm not him. I'm not even worthy to, don't come after me. That to me is the voice. Where that reality sits, that to me is I think, we say they're inspired by an authentic spirit because it fits all the way through, because that's its purpose. When people use it for other reasons, like my dad did.
Mm.
Some of the books my dad had in some of these testimonies, this is for him, and he would write the name of the church member for this. This is for them, This is
He
for
could use it. He could use it to bash people.
Yeah, he never used it for himself. He never said, "This is for me."
It was his iron bar.
That's inauthentic. That is belonging to the, whether they're true or not, it's a
misuse of Ellen.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm saying, and I'm going somewhere with it. So you would suggest, and I'm not in any way going to question you on that. No, yeah, but you're suggesting that she is an authentic inspiration and lies somewhere within the realms of messenger, prophet, inspiring woman, someone that directs you back to Jesus. That's your assessment of her.
That's my experience in the way that I read, and I don't read much, and she led me to understand. Reading led me to my own distance from God. She made that plain. She made it better to me than my dad, who said, "Under my roof, we're going to live under this roof." Oh, stuffy roof. I've got other roofs that will look after you. That authoritarian stuff.
Yeah.
He didn't lead me through. He didn't lead me into that spiritual, but she did.
And lucky for you, you then went to Avondale and got to kind of sit at the feet of people like Des Ford.
And so then I turned to understand the Bible. I turned to understand and read and engage with understanding of Jesus and his ministry and who he is. And I have so much material to study, to learn. I don't need to go there. And I would say this to some of the people that I would be preparing for baptism, as I said, they would relate to it. Not everybody, I would say to them, not everybody uses it like that. The source of authority and explanations, how many angels, buildings, whatever. That's not its purpose to me, and I don't think it's the purpose that she wanted. One of the times when she said, "Hey, why are you coming to me for this theological explanation? Go to the Bible. Get out of my house." I love that. I love that. So for that reason.
where I'm trying to go with it is in this assessment of prophetic, theological, ideological realms and helping people with domestic violence, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, I guess even sexual abuse.
Yes.
In considering the positive aspects of how you've interpreted Ellen and used her in your life, great. When you look at Joseph Smith within Mormonism, and I'm going somewhere with it, so I need I need your thoughts on Joseph Smith. Would you consider him not to be an authentic inspiration in that realm, from your personal opinion?
Look, from my personal opinion is this: God uses a donkey to deliver a message at times. None of these guys, none. Joseph Smith, Ellen White, me, us, none of us are the fullness and full. We always have to be careful. I was always wary of this. And I had a friend who would read a book for Ellen White, and he's 100% for Ellen White. He's thrown out all the butter tubs. He's, just gone off. Then he reads a book against Ellen White, like the, health and all that sort of stuff, and all the copying and all that. He's thrown Ellen White. So
Ronald Numbers, the Health Prophetess.
All that. I've got some of those books that I even got the book on which Desire of Ages is based. The life and teachings of what's it called? The life and teachings of Jesus, actually. And then I've also got the life and teachings of Paul, which is more for the actor. Anyway. And so this guy was, he was only balanced, when he's going from one extreme to the other. So when you catch him in the middle as he's passing through, but he doesn't stay long there. He shifts off and he's gone.
And I guess this is where I'm getting. It's about your own personal stable view of top down. I guess, though, if you looked at Joseph Smith, where he's pointing you to the notion that you are a God, that God himself was once a human like you, that when you die, you will have your own planet and you will start your own world, that you're a god. These are what you and I would probably say are false teachings.
Well, hey, that's a power grab. This is all about. This is how I would. I mean, and I don't even. How can I put it? Let me just pause this for a moment and go back to the DV stuff. There is a process that people talk, or they believe that good people do good things, bad people do bad things. And so when we talk sometimes as parents, we talk to kids and we articulate the word shame on you, and you're a bad thing. And that encapsulates the whole person into badness or goodness. And that's false. The reality is this: good people can do bad things. And bad people can do good things. We need to focus more on the behavior or on that act and work with guilt rather than shame. And I would say the same for Joseph Smith. I would say the same for Ellen White. I would say the same for Peter. I would say the same for Paul.
Yeah.
I would say the same for them. And Paul and Peter would say the same thing. And Paul says about Peter that. And Peter says about Paul. Dude, he's saying things that I got difficulty understanding. I would say the same thing for Des Ford. I would say the same thing. We all on hold. Again, in the group, men will say there's three sides to every story. Whenever you start to go and they want to articulate that, it's not just about them. There's three sides to every story. And now I would say, you're right. There are three sides to every story, but how many sides are you telling in here? How many sides, and how many sides do you hold? And he's gathering a group of people who want to go and send the mob. Oh, look what he said, the system, and off they go. They're ready to kill and protest and upturn the world based on what? How much of information? And I would say to them, how much information do you have about this guy's experiences, or why you're going? What do you know? He doesn't even know, and he's not even telling it. So for us, I think in this spiritual dimension as well, and that's been my learning. I don't know whether you pick it up, but I bring a lot of that experience and learning and the biblical learning into this domestic violence conversation, where name of God is not used, but the reality of the principles are there.
The template of it is there.
It's there.
And this is sorry to jump in, but this is where I was going with that, because I think we agree on this point. And I love that we are looking at all the different sides in this conversation.
Absolutely.
And this is what I'm about. Like, I'm not trying to deconstruct people or the church, but I'm having conversations that look at all sides. See, I've got a friend that's Mormon, and he, in this community, I didn't even know he was Mormon. We were just friends. Our kids go to school together. And he and his wife do fabulous things for the community with literally helping homeless, food kitchens, all sorts of great stuff. I would never say to him, you have a false prophet. Your prophet is crazy and has led many people to damnation. So stop doing what you're doing. I would lean to saying, I don't care where you've come from. What you're doing is amazing. And I'm thinking that maybe you're taking a little bit of that on board as well with your approach.
Can I put it to you, like, in this universe in which we live, and we've articulated our address, this is where we live. The concepts of kindness, selflessness, love, tolerance, appreciation of beauty, where does that come from? We have religious language. We see it clearly articulated, because I preached a little while ago, and it's probably well known. Other people preach it. I picked it up from from other preachers, God is an atheist as well. Doesn't believe about the kind of God that we are portraying him. He doesn't accept that. He's, I'm not buying into that. That's not me. He's an atheist about himself, because our own understanding is so faulty. So where does these things come from? And whenever in our behaviors, whenever we are living, and it's not the path of salvation, but it's that fruit of an understanding or some concept of a higher values, which, hey, in an empty universe, where do they come from? Now, we can see a rejection of these values, and we can see wars and controls and horrible things. Humankind can do the most horrible things. Things. But they can also, whenever it appears, whenever there are people, I never poo-ha that. A little while back, there was when John Paul II, the Pope, and Poland, and there was this push to kind of suppress. In some ways, some Protestants joined with the communists to suppress the Catholics. And I remember saying at the time, I wouldn't do that, because even the Catholics, they find some, even in their in the malaise of all of the different teachings, there is still some opportunity to age and be influenced by the goodness of God, by the character. And I'm not a believer in the moral influence theory, but I believe in moral influence theory, but not as a basis of salvation. I just want to clarify that,
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Because it comes. So whenever I see it, even in men, and whenever we are articulating these higher principles, these gospel principles, that if they follow them or engage in them, they just become better human beings. They become more kinder. They become more observant. They become more livable with.
And if you claim to be a Christian that believes in the Holy Spirit, we're not to do the Holy Spirit's work. Like I love Doctors Without Borders, and I support them with donation. And they're an atheist, charity. But what a great work. And if people say, "Oh, I'm a Christian, I believe in the Holy Spirit, I allow him to work on people's hearts," it's not for us to be judging that. And I come across as a bit judgy about Adventism sometimes, but I'm loving this conversation because it's redirecting us. Well, what at the ground level, living in the now, what's the most important thing? There's a homeless person. Let's try and feed them and give them a place to sleep tonight. Hey, we're going to have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and then close with a lot of the questions and comments that have been pouring through. In that break, if you want, have a look down. I'm going to bring some onto the screen, see if there's any there that are getting your attention. And everyone, we've got people watching from Finland, Kenya, Houston, Texas, all over the world watching right now. And we're really enjoying this conversation.
Well, I should have sort of did myself.
If you'd known.
If
I'd known, I would have done my hair.
You just combed yourself. Right, I'll be right back. I just got to see my grandson.
We'll be back, everyone, in 5 or 10 minutes. Hello and welcome to our second part of our
Here we
program
are.
today, where I'm chatting with Peter Stojanovic. Good to have you here, Peter. What a great conversation. I'm really enjoying this. I love going deep. I love talking into the nitty-gritty. And Peter is known for his work with domestic violence abuse victims and also with helping with the perpetrators as well. It sounds like in what you were saying and just before the break, that your father had a pretty iron-fisted approach to Adventism, and it's kind of a miracle. Like, it sounds like you were spiritually abused, emotionally abused, in that situation. It's a surprise that you stayed within the denomination, but you were able to
Well,
find your way through to a positive landing.
this especially became accentuated when I went to Avondale, and I would come, for holiday visits, and I'd mention the name Ford, and oh my goodness, it would be just like a jab with a needle.
Oh,
It was,
yes.
because
Yeah, he would not have
they had
liked Des
they had a
Ford.
version. Now, my fail in Croatia or Yugoslavia at the time, for his faith, for not working on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
We didn't go to school. You still had to go to school on the Sabbath. We didn't go to school on the Sabbath. So on Monday morning, they would line us up in front of the school and they would shame us, belittle us, that there are still these stupid people that believe in God, and how stupid these people are. And this was the kind of treatment we got from communism,
And you
and it's probably
experienced
one of
it
the reasons.
yourself.
Well, we had it firsthand,
Yeah.
and on Monday morning that would be, and that was one of the reasons why my father left the country,
Yeah.
and we escaped into Austria, came to Australia in 1963. That was the reason. Yet in his own understanding, he had a fairly, narrow, and like one moment that just kind of like illustrates the not thought out process. They in Yugoslavia at the time, 7 day Adventist, you wouldn't do any cooking on Sabbath. Sabbath was really, because it was. And so he and my uncle went to one of these church members' place. She invited them to her place on the Sabbath, just for a visit or whatever. And she went to make tea. So she boiled the water and put it, and it was now cooked up on the Sabbath. And they were in a dilemma. What are they going to do with this? This is not what we do. So she went from the living room where she left the tea. She went into the kitchen to get some cakes. And when she was out there, they found the window and they turfed the tea out the window so they wouldn't drink it. And then she'd come back with the cakes and said, "Oh, you enjoyed the tea." No, it was lovely tea. And it would never dawn on them how
Offensive.
shallow that is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the problem of the Sabbath. Jesus didn't have a problem with the Sabbath. He had a problem with the way that people were applying that stuff. He had to tell them, "Dude, this is made for you, not you for it." It was just like, you got to understand this. And so it would never dawn on them that lying just as bad as Sabbath. It never occurred to them, But then again, you got to be compassionate with that too, because of their experience, because it was shaped by the Second World War, the trauma of all of that, communism and depression and oppression. Dude, if you want to know more about Adventists, just go to a communist country and see what oppression is.
Exactly.
It's that overpower with the power. It's just in full control. I even knew that as a 9-year-old kid, as a 10-year-old. And when I came to Australia, I was an inmate. I'm not a socialist at all. And then I find myself in my latter life, in my current life, working with the lefties. Everybody in my office is a lefty. And
yeah, they would be.
But we can fit in. I mean, I can fit in. I'd have biblical discussions with them. I said, "No, I can," and they're just kind of like shocked, because there is a lot of that concern and compassion, which we share even with the lefties,
Mm.
you know. And whenever I find a place where we can link and support, I'll go there.
Common ground.
Never throw the whole thing out, because good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things. And we need to encourage the good for it. Anyway, that's...
Do you remember talking to your dad about Des Ford?
Oh, yeah. And I certainly learned not to mention the name, because to him that sounded all too liberal, you know, this idea, you know, unsaved, always saved. Yeah, some of these things, and yet we know, you know, and I could never bring it. I influenced my brother, and my brother then got to know the gospel that translated, and he got to read and went to listen and went to hear, and his own life before he died was, he'd had that spiritual awakening and that gospel assurance in the Adventist church. It was beautiful to see, you know. It was lovely to pass this on to other people as well. And that was a beautiful thing, and I think that's how good. And that's the reason why I stayed, because the church did not prevent me from being the better version of me and understanding the gospel more effectively and applying it in my life. Nobody stood in my way there.
Good point.
And I'll tell you, you know, I came as a minister out in the 1980s, and now I'm a pastor in the height of the, you know, some people would say to me, do you believe in 1844? I said, yeah, I believe in 1844. I believe in 1845, 1846, 1847. I believe in all that stuff. And, you know, you'd read the stuff, you know, in the record, and it was a flame of mistrust and pressure, and one side with the other. And then you'd get articles every now and then written in the record, particularly by the guy. It was just like, and one day there's this record article, and I am inflamed. I've had enough of this. And I drive to the conference office in Victoria, and I'm absolutely outraged. And Ken Lowe was the president at the time. If you know him, those who know him. But this was the guy who knew the gospel and lived it as well. His door was open, and he sees me, and I'm agitated. And he's going, oh, my boy, come on in. Sat down, he goes, what brings you to the office today? And I am outraged. Look at this stuff. Look at this stuff that this guy is writing, and look what he's saying in this theological stuff, and he's bringing this out. This is whatever. He goes, whoa, stop. He goes, what do you pay? I said, to preach the gospel. Oh, he says, then get out of my office and go and preach the gospel. Get away from this stuff. This is an issue now. In the 1880s, it was something else. Later on, it became something else. Then the three little horns, you know, they had a division over that, you know. Then in the future, it'll be something else. Do you want to hook yourself up to these controversies? Dude, you have no time for that. Go and preach the gospel. Do you know Jesus? Do you love Jesus? Do you want people to know Jesus? Go. I remember getting up out of that and I'm thinking, that makes all the sense in the world to me. Leave that stuff. And in my own mind, I made a conscious decision that went like this. I sorted out a simple thinker. I sorted out what is of significance. Because I asked the question, even in our discussions at times, even in the workplace right now, what are you prepared to bleed for? What are you prepared to spill blood for? Somebody else's and your own. What is that? What are the beliefs? What are those? So, in my own mind, I decided, okay, that matters. And Ken Lowe told me that, reaffirmed that to me, that's what matters. And he just reshaped me and he said, well, then get out and do it. You know, why are you fluffing around with other things? And I realized that that which is important for salvation is always going to be central. Jesus is the center of the universe and the revelation of God. But he is known to people or revealed to people in different ways, even with different names. We know that. And there are some people who never heard of Jesus, but we're all saved by him and by his work. He's the only door. And so I would say to myself, okay, that is important. This is not important. Is not important if you believe it or don't believe it. It's like not important. So I never made it my mission to go into the minds of people and extrapolate all of this and line them all up in about the things that really were, because that's where I was going with that, and I would be only ending up in conflicts and fights. I had enough of those too, but you would do that, and I remember going out from Ken's advice and saying, dude, you're getting paid to do this, delivering the good news. Go. And that's been my journey. And that's why I say, and I found the gospel in the context of the Adventist church, feeble and defective as it is, and changes and with all of its faults. But I also know that every denomination, every organization, everybody has the same failures. Some of the men would say, they say, well, I picked a toxic one, I married the wrong person. I said, really? Can I just say to you that every woman is a wrong person? Every person is a wrong or right person. Because you married her, she's the wrong one, but what did she get? Are you the right person? Are you that person that is a prize? Who are you?
It's that personal responsibility coming through again.
Absolutely. And then we see this, but then later on, we still got to do the work. In any relationship, you can change the pot plant because it's died, say, I'm going to buy another pot plant, but you still got to look after the new one. Otherwise, that's got to go as well. So it's got to. So we don't escape, and we shouldn't run away from that. The fact that there's abusiveness, etc., and I never support abusive behavior because abusive is anti-God. It's anti him. It's anti his character. In this issue of divorce, for example, I solved that for myself ages ago. Adultery is not the only breach of the marriage vow. Other breaches are. To love, abuse and violence has no place in it. So that's the kind of thing. So what I'm saying is that was the way that I stayed within this community, because it offered me. That's where I came into, and I discovered that. Had I not discovered the gospel, had I not seen it like that, I probably wouldn't stay in it.
Do you believe
because it's the gospel?
Do you believe that keeping the Sabbath is connected with salvation, your salvation?
I believe that, and again, there's a personal journey, and then there is a, whichever way you look at it, and then if you read it any way you like, God left it in a place. He creates humanity. He creates people for a relationship, and he says, "This is my interpretation." And he's going, you know what? One day aside, we'll all have a day off, and let's all just kind of just get closer and just refocus, just like you did before with the internet. Tune out,
we have a little reboot,
and reboot. This is a reboot time, and when it's used like that, it's such a blessing to have. Otherwise, we'd work ourselves silly. Otherwise, we'd destroy ourselves because we are so selfish and so overdone at it, to stop us. And I know, who lose their lives because they're so busy making money, working, that they never have time to pause, reflect on the bigger picture in terms of where they are, or even refocus on their family. I don't believe that Sabbath should be used as a distinction of obedience, because there are other 9 commandments that are there as well. I would say sometimes to my church, we focus on one, but there's other 9, and 2. They're all there.
And a lot of people aren't good at following commandment number 9. They bear false witness, they gossip. And I'm like, oh, okay, but you're worried about me and the Sabbath?
Yeah. It's like, as if this is, it's not your saving grace. It's not our saving grace. But it does say Sabbath in some ways will demonstrate that we're listening to God's invitation into a deeper relationship. And that to me is the significant part.
Do you believe?
We hear the voice of God saying, I want to have a deeper relationship. Just as even as an example, because why is it there from the start? Because it's there even before sin. It's there before, it's in the garden where they don't even get tired, or they don't need that physical rest in that sense. And we know that God works all the way through, so, but the indicator of it is, the reasoning for it is, as I understand, I want a relationship with you. That's why I'm creating you. I run away, he connect, because that's what it is. Now, there are going to be people who are saved, like that pastor friend of mine, we talked with the Uniting Church minister about the Sabbath, and he simply said, I'm just not, I hear it, but I just don't have. That's not for me. I don't decide these things. He who's got the nail prints on his hands, mate, he works with you. And it's not the determining factor. I think the problem, that I see that we can get into is that we made it the feature of that final configuration. It's kind of like both days start off with S, but it's different, Saturday, Sunday, But I don't see that. But that's a problem of how people interpret it. I've heard my father's interpretation through his own experience. I've seen it with the guy that's had the knapsack and the boots and the cans, ready to
go.
Where he is. He's in the grave, mate. He's gone ages ago, and even didn't have the child. I even heard say,
didn't even get a chance.
I look forward to dying. I look forward to dying so I don't go through this time of trouble. And in that script, that to me is problematic. It's not an issue of Sabbath, but it's the problem with that interpretation. In that script,
is it that they're misinterpreting it, or does the official Adventist teaching support what they believe? This is what I'm having trouble finding out.
It's an official,
I find in everyone that
interpretation. It's
like when I talk to people, I get all sorts of individual interpretations, and some are more gospel, and some are more biblical based, and some are more like your dad's version. But I'm having trouble finding out anyone that can say what the official church stance is on the Sabbath and the Sunday law at end of time and keeping it as a test. When I read Great Controversy, I get a general feeling that, it's a little bit more than what you're saying. But what is the church's official stance?
But look at that question in terms even that Great Controversy view. If you look at the context in which that was written, that kind of interpretation fits, because they were persecuted. They felt persecution. They felt alienation, because of the disappointment and some of that stuff, So they kind of experienced a bit of that sharper end of things. And the church, not just the church, but the whole world was a little bit more dogmatic. In communism, you had the communism, East, West, Iron Curtains, This is a context out of which...
You're talking about Great Controversy being in context to its time.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's its context, Now, in terms of taking that all the way through, I see things differently now in a practical sense. I remember a time in this country where, and I know that, you couldn't buy a beer on a Sunday, right? You had to go searching for it in clubs. There was only certain places where you could buy it because we went looking for it. Now, everything's open on a Sunday. Everything's open. So the idea of that and in some ways I'm thinking, that people had a greater focus on family and spiritual life rather than be poisoned by Hollywood and its mantras, and the brainwashing that comes out of that. We don't even know whether we are arthurs or martyrs these days. It's kind of like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's just
Things
confusion
change
central.
and
What's real, what's false. This is our time. So to kind of to swim it all just onto that puts us, I think, in a difficult that we misinterpret the time in which we live. Just as the people in Jesus' time, they had interpretations of what the Messiah was to look like, so they had their own interpretation. They look at the Messiah.
They thought he was returning any day as well.
Yeah, and they look at the Messiah and they look at the interpretation. Oh, sorry, but that doesn't fit, so they throw out the Messiah, and they're still waiting. Because this is the danger, I think, of being so, rigid. I know this, though, and I do know this. I think C.S. Lewis puts it the best. C.S. Lewis, how this whole end thing looks like, and this is what he says. In the end, there are two groups of people. One group say to God, your will be done. The other group, God says to them, your will be done. And that's what you get. That's what you want. In the end, you get the desire of your heart. And I think that distinction is a daily thing for me. I'm in life, when I'm changing a car tire, I'm either a spiritual person or a secular person. Whatever I do, it comes from a space either of that connection with God, and through that frame, that, or I don't have it. So I would always find difficult this idea, especially within the Adventist community, and I would never get to that, but they get to that. They make a distinction between secular talk and spiritual talk. So, Sabbath is for spiritual talk. You can't talk about this. And I'm going, dude, what are you doing? How do you separate yourself? So in other words, you're saying, I live as a secular person. Every talk, every day is you're either spiritual or secular. It's not a one-day thing. So I don't go into those things. But for my father, throwing the tea out the window was important to him because that's the way he related to it. But that particular process, or it had its benefit for him. It held him in a place. And because of his own experience, and he did jail time and nearly froze there. They nearly executed him 3 times, He's been before a firing squad, he's shot.
Yeah.
So his views...
Whole other life, isn't it?
His views are going to be different. So I think... But then again, going to the officialdom, the church officialdom.
Yeah.
Peter, I honestly believe I'm not persecuted by them. I'm not. I go to church and I listen. And sometimes it's very hard to be a pew person listening to people talking. And I was a talker at the front as a minister, and I never realized how difficult a job that is for people to listen to all the talk. And you're listening to stuff and you're going, what is all of this about? But then again, I remember from one conference, Archibald Hart was the guy they invited to do a mission. And Archibald Hart was a Baptist.
Wow.
Now listen to me. That is a big thing, that the church administration invites and allows their ministers to be spoken to by Baptists, for goodness sake, non-Sabbatarian. And Archibald Hart described his wife as a churchgoer. He says, my wife she comes to church, she approaches church. She goes around with him. This is how she approaches it. She has a prayer, and her prayer is this. Before she leaves home, she says, Lord, please give me a sentence that will inspire me today. So she goes to church and she's waiting for her sentence. And she's sifting and listening, and her sentence comes. She picks it, holds it, and she's blessed. I like that. Me, on the other hand, as being a minister, an opinionated minister at times, and argumentative and all that, I'm passing a whole bunch of good sentences. Oh, he's off there. He's off there. He's there. He's the gospel, not here. And I'm actually doing myself a disservice.
Yeah.
I'm picking up the rubbish and taking it home, rather than leaving the rubbish there and taking the good bits, that remembering again, none of us, out of many words, jeepers creepers, will be, that the crucifiers with stones ready to go, I hope they're just those foam stones, out of rubber. Because, yeah. And that's why I stayed.
What do you think?
I stayed because I could do that.
What do you think then is the unique thing about Adventism? What's its unique mission and plan for the world?
Do you know, for me, I think there are two doctrines that, to me, are really significant. One is the state of the dead and understanding this element. And the reason for it is why that's such a critical factor, because it goes directly to the character of God. It challenges, and it actually degrades that doctrine and idea, degrades God in the most significant way. Let me tell you how. If I believe that there is eternal punishment for sinners and eternal suffering that goes on, I have to believe in a God who rejoices in suffering. And then I tell people a story. Let's imagine that somebody kills one of my children, murders one of my kids. If I sought the death penalty for that person, I'd probably find some people who would either understand that, and they would, in some ways, port that in some ways, right? But what if I had the power to choose the suffering of this person? And the way that I designed it is this. Okay, let's not put them to death, because that takes them out too quick. They don't suffer. Let us buy him health food and give him all the healthiest food. And then 6 o'clock in the morning, the beating and the torturing starts. And whenever this person unconsciousness, we stop, because we want him to be revived. We give him good tablets. We give him, vitamins, and make sure that they're revived, because we want them to be conscious. And as soon as they become conscious, we resume the suffering. We resume the torture. And then when it goes again, and I want this person to be kept alive with the best of medication, so that he can experience, I can extract every and pain for this individual because of what he has done. Who am I? How do you see me then? And I would say, man, you're worse than the murderer. Belief of immortal soul, immortal suffering, requires me to believe in that kind of God, and I don't. I can't. So that, to me, that is a significant distinguishing
State
doctrine.
of the dead.
State of the dead is huge, because it has direct implications onto the character and the nature of God.
It's the significant doctrine, and it is a unique one. But I'm wondering, what does the church say its significant message is? Like, if you read Great Controversy, read a lot of Finlay, Ted Wilson, Doug Batchelor, source material of the Adventist Church, it seems to say that their most unique, significant message is that we are a special people for the time of trouble, that are a commandment-keeping people that have the spirit of prophecy demonstrated in the life of Ellen G. White, and that we are here to vindicate God, prove Satan's claim wrong that you can't keep the commandments, and one day at the time of trouble, just before the Lord returns, this pre-Advent judgment will occur, and a final team will be selected, righteous, the sealed, and they must then stand for a short time without an intercessor. That's the unique, in a nutshell, Adventist message that up until recently, perhaps the 60s, 70s, and now, is less pushed. Although Ted Wilson wants to, make sure that every day someone's getting
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what is the unique Adventist claim? Not necessarily what yours is, but what is the unique claim that Adventism is making?
Do you know what? That's something that they make, but I'm an Adventist, but I don't see it in those terms. And I don't invite people into those terms and say, now that you're in, there was that line, in the truth, this bringing somebody into the truth. And the truth was beliefs that have been written down, paragraphs and sentences written down.
But are they coming into, say you bring someone into the church, sorry to jump in, but if you're bringing someone into the church and you're saying, look, you might stumble across what the church claims to be its main mission and focus, but that's not how I read it. So come into my Adventism, then don't you have to be a bit careful that they don't stumble across the other little versions?
No, I don't think we should let them stumble at all. Put it out there. But the thing is that there are different views to the world, and I've grown up in different parts of the world. And if you go to different sections, or you go through different times, or you go even at different political structures where the church lives. I had a wise old minister I used to work with, and he said, "This is the ethos of the church, the administrative nature of the church is guided by the political ethos of sectarian or dogmatic or iron-fisted political system. The church reflects that because it can't, some of the influences of that are not as, and if you look at the debates within the context of the church, they come from different areas depending. The Californian Adventists are different to the, or the administrative part, different to
but if the church is going to have a unique message for the last days, surely it shouldn't be so varied by individuals in different parts of the world and political changes.
But this is the whole point, Peter.
Is my suggestion of what the original claim of the church's last message for the last days was, is that wrong?
I'll tell you what, what I will say about that. But see, this depends where the emphasis is. I go back to that Jehovah's Witness who comes to my door to tell me that my beliefs, statements, paragraphs are wrong, and his beliefs, statements, and paragraphs are right. And my contention with him was, dude, Jesus is the door. Doctrinal stances and interpretations are not the truth. They describe or seek to codify in some ways what we perceive is the truth. And our perceptions of truth also change over time. Now, when you were a kid, you saw things differently to the way you see them now. And you understand and interpret things. So you look at the issue, but you approach it in a different way.
Therefore, it's no longer a unique message for the last days. It's like a...
But it is. But you know what?
But it's no longer, because it can be interpreted in any different ways depending on where I am, how old I am, what part of the world I live, what the political ramifications are. The Adventist unique special remnant meaning, reason for being, doesn't seem that clear anymore. I mean, I'm glad it's not. I like the way you and I would agree on most things. We've landed on the same kind of page, but I'm just wondering, what's the official stance of the church when it comes to vindicating God, being the remnant, standing without a mediator, being here with the express purpose to show other planets and other angels that we can prove Satan's claim you can't keep the commandments, that we've got to prove him wrong and vindicate God. That's the thrust of Adventism from the early days right through to now, if you listen to Ted Wilson. And I'm just trying to say, where can I find that's been changed? Or is it just up to the individuals to change it? And we all have our own different kind of versions of it, which I think is healthy. But I'm saying if we all, that's healthy, we're all healthy because we're going to read it and interpret our own way. But surely the unique church for end times has got to have somewhere that has a little flashing light. This is our core belief, and I can't find it.
Dude, I have never seen, and this, I'm glad it's like this, because you know what, Peter, it's like my comfort, my security, my assurance was never with the church. It was never in those paragraphs. It was never in those interpretations, because I sat through those interpretations. And this was my experience as a young person in the church listening to the sermon. And this is real. I would listen and I'd go off on his tangents, you know, and I'd go, oh, no hope for me, I'm lost. No hope for me, I'm lost. I might as well step outside, go to the pub and be done with this, because I'm done. Then I go next week and I'm going, oh, there's hope for me. Actually, this is for me. I feel invited. And this is the thing. If you look at politics today, you look at an interpretation of a certain thing you have, because, you know, your question can go to the politics. Kamala, what are you standing on? And dude, what are you going to get? You ask them. You ask Albanese here and say, hey, they're slip and sliding all over the shop. What is
it? That's what I'm getting from most Adventists, though. I'm getting what you're saying is the answers I'm getting from most Adventists, and they go, "Well, that's what I believe. I know the church says something different." And I go, "What does the church say?" Well, I don't really know. I'm on a mission to find out what is unique and special about Adventism outside of Protestantism, outside of other denominations. The claim is it is unique. The claim is that it's remnant. The claim is it's special. The claim is that it is so special, it has a unique message for these last days. I'm going, okay, where is it? Ted Wilson's preaching it. And I say, Ted Wilson's preaching it. Oh, we don't believe in Ted. We're interpreting it differently. So if you can interpret it differently, what's Adventism?
And you know what, Peter? Maybe that's the unique part that we should hold on to. Because if we're a Bible-focused people and of inquiring, learning, and then following the truth as revealed, that's an ongoing journey that never stops. And maybe the uniqueness of Adventism is that experience, because it's been in the dogmatic phase, and we know what happened to that. We know the pain and suffering that brought, and the hurt that brought. You know, take one example.
Don't get me wrong, by the way. I'm not trying to push that Ted Wilson view. I'm pushing your view. I'm pushing your view. But I'm just saying, where do we find that as an official church stance?
You know, when I left college, I was an ethnic, you know, from ethnic, and in ethnic communities, we could wear a wedding ring. Men could wear a wedding. In the Australian context, I was not allowed to wear, and I was not allowed to conduct a double-banded wedding. It was not prescribed. Drinking coffee or tea, dude. Today you go to the church, there's a coffee machine up there, and they're serving coffee, and everybody's caffeinated.
These are all standards that shift and ebb and flow, like politics and beliefs and ideologies. But I'm saying the Adventist church, where can I go to find? So I'll go to Ted Wilson. You'd think I can go to the president of the global church, and I'll say, I did a show. This is Ted Wilson. He's a real Adventist. And I said what he said about all these things, about the last days, the special remnant, all of that stuff. And everyone said, oh, whoa, that's not our Adventism. I go, okay, good. Well, where do I go if I can't go to the very top to find out not standards, not shifts in politics, none of that? What is the special reason for being of Adventism that makes it set apart from the world? Isn't it set apart?
You're looking for something that should not be found and cannot be found.
Oh,
You can't. And you
thank
shouldn't
you.
find it, and it can't be found. Because if you find it, you have attached yourself to an entity that is not a journey that you and I should be on.
Even though its claim is that it does have that?
Hey, dude, there's been claims have been made and claims have been made and claims are made. Because, the problem with all of this, I think there's a practical element. And I go back to the men again, because they're my educators. I learned all those, as their thinking, their beliefs that undermine them and destroy them. And it's the belief that you have within yourself. So here's one interesting one, is the one, for example, we would say, do people have a right to their opinion? And everybody would say in the room, yep, everybody has a right to their opinion. Do you believe that? They go, yep. And the whole full of these deviant offenders, opinion. But then I say to them, but that's not where the problem really is. Because you acknowledge that everybody has a right to their opinion, but that's not where the problem is. You know where the problem is? The relationship you have to your own opinion.
Yeah.
That's the problem. If you marry yourself to your opinion, and your opinion is the only valid one,
I agree. I don't disagree with you.
All of that is negated. Now, if I'm going to look for somebody that's going to negate everybody else's opinion, I shouldn't find that place, because that place cannot be and should not be in the hands of humans. It doesn't belong to us, because we cannot be these people. So you're right. This is their interpretation. This is his interpretation at the time. I hear it and I can tune out. The Holy Spirit helps me there. You know how the Holy Spirit works? I used to always worry about if I bring somebody into the church, what will they hear? I used to stress, man, what's going to be? Is it going to be the cabby, And I had George Munoz, who was a good friend of mine, and he said, Peter, relax. You need to see how the Holy Spirit works. How does the Holy Spirit work, Munoz? The people go into the church and the Holy Spirit goes like this. It filters. And I think, I like that. And when I work with, I have to filter as well.
So Adventism doesn't have a special message for these last days.
It has. It has a special message. You know what the special message, I believe it is? The special message is that we want to follow the Bible. We want to get deeper into the truth.
Is that your interpretation of what I'm saying? What's the special message that the church says? Where can I go? Send me the link.
Where can I go but to the Lord? I say to people, the truth is not sentences and paragraphs. The truth is the person. And that's its specialness.
And the practical actions of that person.
That's the person. That's the person.
So it's no different then. It's no different really to being Uniting Church, Methodist, Baptist. It's no real difference to any of those.
But you know what, though? You know what it is, though? There would be, or there could be, because one of the things that we are Bible and we sift, and we have certain things that some people don't have, and like the state of the dead, and there could be, even in the issue around health, or some of these focuses that we have generated have been a blessing to us individually and to the community. There are things that we went on, but some of the ways we went, I've been in Avondale, mate, when all the butters were gone. Nobody has butter except me. I've got butter. And then when the Nappy Valley people would come, they're going for my fridge and they're just buttering it up. So not butter. We can't eat butter because that's bad. You can only have 5 almonds. I never used to count my almonds. So we went through these, pick up something, and then they turn into what it was never meant to be.
Yeah.
In terms of the special message, I'll tell you a story. I was at a camp in I was at a camp in Victoria, at the Harcourt camp. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a
Which
youth
one?
camp, beautiful place. Harcourt. It's got
Yes.
a beautiful
Yeah.
river. It was
Been there a lot.
beautiful. Anyway, there was a camp, but there is a lodge a little bit further away. And I lodge, and it was nighttime. The camp was lit, but the lodge was in darkness. Now I got to walk from no torch, no moonlight, no stars. I'm walking now from the camp to this lodge. And there's a road, and it's a gravel road, and I am petrified. I'm sort of walking with my feet, feeling the gravel like I'm in gravel. I'm going to bump off and, go off and hit a tree, because there's no light. I'm just like groping in the darkness, but I make it to the lodge. And then I thought, wow, that was a stressful journey. Imagine if I had moonlight or starlight even would help a little bit more easier, more secure. If I had the moonlight, half moon, quarter moon, full moon, it just increases. And I walk the same journey in daylight. Same journey. I arrive at the chalet, but I arrive in a different way. My journey was different. I think for me, searching for the truth or putting the truth in and being consistent, sifting a bit and putting them in, I think that is a blessing. And as Adventists, we have some of this. We also have some of the stuff that that kind of doesn't belong. That doesn't create that safer journey. And I think I would say to people, I think we owe it to ourselves. And as Adventists, and in some instances we do, but some of it gets astray in terms of how some people interpret this. That we are following biblical ways, including Sabbath, for example. But again, not in some ways that it's interpreted, because every one of those truths is some upended, and it ends up, Jesus experienced that in his time and argued that point with them. So I still invite people into this community, not because of that, but there are people there who know the gospel. There are people who live in the gospel. And you know what? They actually come because of those paragraphs and sentences that have changed over time and might change again. They come into this community because they felt asked, or I had people say to me the other week, we were in a Sabbath school class, and these people are there. They said, you know why we are members of this church? Because of these guys. And they point to me and Mary. And I'm thinking, not sure about that. Is when we came here for a visit, they invited us home for lunch. At lunch, we're here. I think in that relationship, and let me quote Ellen White, she says, if we were kind, considerate, if we were kind, courteous, pitiful, tender-hearted, loving, compassionate, there would be 100 conversions to the truth when there isn't one. That it's true, other people espouse that too, and that's okay. I never prevent it, or I rejoice in that, because he is the way, he is the truth, and he is the light. And for me, I enjoy the Sabbath day because it's a blessing to me. I learned to switch off, which I would not do if it wasn't there, if I didn't pay attention to it. And again, it's not just that one day. I have that relationship with God every day. In fact, I live in that 7 days a week, even when I'm working, doing whatever. So that's how I see it. But what is it? I'm glad it's not just that. I'm glad that it's a thing. Ted Wilson will go.
I love my favorite comment of the day, and when you said it, there were like a rush on the Facebook group. You can't see it here on the YouTube comment. There was just a flurry of love hearts when I explained what what the Ted Wilson view and the traditional view, the heritage historicist view of what this special remnant is. And you said you're looking for something that can't be found, and I wanted an official place and shouldn't be found. And I thought that was a really honest and authentic thing to say, because in many ways, this kind of stuff, the Ted Wilson thing, this theology, the act, like you said, Ellen White herself was saying, look, just kindness, feed someone. Uh, and one of the great things that I love about what you do is that you flip that all on its head. You go, okay, here's all this stuff over here. It shouldn't be found in some ways, because it takes away from the energies that can be put in to starting a group that helps people that have been through domestic violence, that stops that kind, hey, do you want to come over for lunch kind of thing. For me personally, I found Adventism such a quagmire of all these ideas and theologies and crazy time of trouble stuff. I couldn't clearly dedicate my life to doing the sort of stuff that you do. And as I left the church and was able to kind of see a simpler kind of gospel, which I think you've found as well, a simpler gospel in the four gospels, the teachings of Jesus, I was able to go, oh, okay, right. And then started an outflow of, well, what can I do for community and what can I do around here? That's just me personally. I couldn't juggle the two together. I'm glad you can, and honestly, hundreds and hundreds of viewers that
And
watch
they do.
the show, they tell me they've found that as well. So good on them.
And I think that's the bit we should. I think we should use the word "should." That to me is the thing for celebrating. It sort of says, because I at work, I work in. Let me just be very frank. I work for organizations. Some people say you're already off with you work for the Pope. I don't. But Catholic, this is a centre care is a social arm of, and it's not
run by the Catholics. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
You're not getting accused of being a Jesuit, are you?
Yeah, not yet, but I mean, I'm sure that'll come. But and the thing about it is that they have certain procedures, arrangement. Now, let me just explain it, and I hope, not too many Catholics will be listening to this. I can be frank. They're so petrified of risk. We got to nail the risk. Risk of suicide, harm, death, etc. Do you know why? And it's an imposition. For example, I can't see a couple until I see them individually to be brought together because of this risk factor. So the procedural risk assessment is so imposing, it's a burden, that we at times neglect to do what we need to do because it's a barrier. Why do they have it? Because they're not protecting the people, they're protecting their organization. Because if there was a murder, and I don't know how much I should say this, but I had a call with a person. That person didn't come to the session. But before, our policies is to ring them back and find out why didn't they come, etc. And I didn't really follow that much, because I think, man, if you didn't come, you got to ring. This is your responsibility. But this time, I actually called this guy. Called him but he didn't answer about, you missed your appointment. Can we help you with another appointment? This man murdered his partner, one of the most horrific murders. When that was found out that he was a client, where they went to first? Into the file. What did you do? And when they saw that the procedures were followed, they said to me, we can breathe easy. Dude, the woman, I don't breathe easy. My thing was, man, what difference would it have made had he come? That's my thinking. So they have these processes in place to protect them. It's not about service. It is about service as well, because if if we go drag before the Royal Commissions and don't you follow procedures, and we hear this all the time. You know, as long as you follow procedures, doesn't matter that they're dead. And that to me is always problematic. You know, because we refer people. They come and see us. We just refer them on. Nobody says this is domestic violence. There's no place where there's a full stop. When they come in, you ain't going further. Behavior. There's no place. So they're bunted by the police, they're bunted by the probation and parole office, they're bunted by us into other services. We have done our duty because we assess for risk, and we take it on. So structure. And in the church, why that to me is the comparison. That can be so structurally insane, but that's not the point. Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to God except through me. There's my mantra. There's my doctrine. There is my pathway. And I'll invite, encourage, and the church. And then there are preachers, some beautiful preachers, mate. Recently here in the community I'm in, we've been blessed by superb preachers.
Seventh-day Adventist preachers.
Seventh-day Adventist
Tell
preachers,
us some good Adventist preachers that we can recommend.
Ty Gibson, mate. You listen to Ty Gibson.
He's an independent ministry, though. I mean, what's a good official Adventist ministry?
Oh, dude, he's an Adventist to me. He comes and preaches in my church. Right. Ex-official or not, I'm going, man,
no ordained Seventh-day Adventist ministers you can recommend.
No, I would. There are people. I mean, we got Robbie, he's another minister that's in this church where I'm at. Robbie, he's got this beautiful long hair, but he's not as white as yours. And he barefooted dude, he's just come off the beach, but he has this passion for the beach. He tells these stories, they come out. Hey, it gives me goosebumps. It's beautiful. We sit there and we go, man, this was good to be here. But there is also, I'm sitting with my grandkids who want to go home. Can we just not sit here? Me, I would pick them up and take them out. But their parents, no, I said to my son, what are you doing to your people, to your children? You know, when you were young, when you were a kid of 7, middle of the afternoon, it's a sunny day, but it's a Sabbath. And you would come to me and you would say, Dad, Sabbath finished yet? It's middle of the afternoon. We're getting sunburn. You need hats. I said, listen, my boy, for you, it's finished. What do you want to do? Let's go. And we would go and do. Today, he's strumming the guitar in the church, he's singing, he's engaging, he's policing with domestic violence people, he's engaged in life and the community. Not because of the doctrinal. He's studying, he's learning, he's picking up things that I didn't teach him or educate him into. He's finding his own way, but it's beautiful. But I say to him, listen, my son, don't do this to your son, where you force things on him. It becomes a resentment. You move it. No, stay in the relationship. You have him sitting there and he's resenting every sentence, every moment. Who benefits out of that? And to me, these doctrinal things are the same. If there's no benefit in it, don't push it. Leave it be. Stay.
It's a shame that so many parts of the church are pushing it. That's the sad thing.
Well, and I have that. I teach a Sabbath school class every now and then, and there are people that came and they don't come. You know, and that's okay with me. I don't go chasing them. I don't have any resentment. I'm going back. I'm not, I'm not the fit. But that's okay. I don't go there and have to impose this, And I think if we develop this relationship, if we focus on the relationship, because at At the end of the day, when you really think about it, why does God want to save us? Why does he look for us in the Garden of Eden? What does he want with us? What? People sometimes think that, well, we use that phrase so that we give him praise. Really? Why, God's got depressed spirits. Why does he want us? Because that's who he is. He's a relation. He wants us for a relationship. And this idea to praise God, and it's all about praise. That's an annoying at times, line at times for me. Like, what? I'm going to lift his spirits? He's not depressed. Now, when I praise him, I get the benefit. Because when I am in a space, when I'm in awe of his majesty and his beauty, which is him, and I recognize that, and I join in applauding that or expressing that in some way, I get the blessing of that. Wow. That to me is uniqueness and value. And I found this in my journey through the Adventist community. I might have found this elsewhere too. I don't know. And I know that there have been people that I have invited, and through the ministry and through engagement that they have joined as well. And some of them I find years and years later, and they come to me and they say, you know what, my friend, I'm so glad you came to me that day. I'm so glad I am where I am because I found myself. And that's nice. Anyway, I'm preaching now.
No, it's back to that practical element, that we were talking about right at the start.
Yeah.
And in many ways, the whole thrust of this conversation has been to go, yeah, there is all this other stuff here. For you found a way. For others, they find a way. Some don't. Some leave. Some stay. For me personally, I found it liberating to go, oh, okay, this is much easier to understand when I push the lens of Adventism aside. But that doesn't mean that those who have managed to keep it and work within it and find, it doesn't mean that I'm saying they're wrong. We're all just got our own personal journeys and paths. But the main focus of this conversation has been what was the most important practical thing that we have been called to do. And I think in your life, you're living that and you're doing that. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the program and sharing that story and being willing to look at all the different sides of it, but to ultimately land back into what are we doing at a practical level just to build community and help people. And what you're doing with your work with domestic violence it would be incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
Can you, for those that have been watching, and there's been a few comments that I didn't pull up because they've experienced domestic violence. Those watching and a few people have sent me some private messages as well. They're literally saying, where can we go to actually get some help? What would you recommend?
That is such a powerful question, because just before the answer that is that domestic violence is so tricky, or it's so sinister, that both the perpetrator minimizes it and at times the victim minimizes it as well. Now, they minimize it for different reasons. The perpetrator minimizes the fact that he's a violent and abusive, want that label on his forehead, and he doesn't want to be seen like that. And he says, but I'm not always like that. The victim tends to minimize it because that choice or that decision to be in this kind of relationship that has these elements, the answer comes back, well, what's a thing of a struggle? And there is far more people in abusive relationships who actually, they still don't know that they're actually in an abusive relationship, because it's been masked or caked over, or culturally or even religiously or doctrinally or experientially, they don't actually see until they are masked. And sometimes they don't want to see it because it brings shame to the church, or bring shame to the family or even to themselves, to their own decision that they've made. Because, like the question earlier, why do you stay? It's kind of like, so both in some ways collude to minimize it, deny it, and blame it away onto Satan or somebody else. What would I say to people who are experiencing it? It's a Bible story. It's a Bible example. Don't settle for the crumbs. As a human and as a person, Christ has placed his value on you, and you're deserving of a full loaf of bread. You are worthy. Where do you go for help? There are organizations, the church. Contact them, make the call. There's DV Connect, Respect, 1-800 and DV Connect. There are any numbers. Seek it out. Ask the question, because you, me, and everyone, and this is both true. The perpetrator will not recognize they're perpetrating as long as they can get away with it, because they don't have to. His script, and this is how it works. Let me tell you how it actually works. Just because one thing I learned is that how do perpetrators see themselves as victims is the question. How do I get to that? And in their head, they've got a script. What a happy life is, what a husband is, what a wife is, what a happy and a functional family is, and how things should operate. They have a script. And they have that script because that's what they believe, that's what they've picked up. And it's that script, and they're saying to themselves, if people comply with that script, we're all going to be happy. I'll be happy, she'll be happy in this beautiful nirvana. The problem is that there are other scripts that are running. So when she resists that script, he sees that as a character flaw. Well, you're disobedient, you're just toxic. Why are you kicking I'm doing the intention is this. So they're pushing themselves, they're scripting themselves or give themselves the authority to permission themselves to impose their view onto somebody else. And when they resist, that's a character flaw and they're bad. And then they say to themselves, well, thank you for ruining our life because, they are victims, person who's not compliant to their script. Right. You are robbing me, robbing us of a happy life. You hope you're satisfied. That's why they're victims. But they never ask themselves the question, how do you get the right? How do you get to say what the script should be? Who gives you that job? Where do you get that authority? Yeah. That's how it works. So I would say it doesn't go away. People endure it. People can suffer it. But for it to end, the Band-Aid has to be ripped off. Right. And that's a difficult process at times. It's not an easy journey. But my daughter said to me, and I was saying she's ever said to me, and there was a particular time when she was struggling, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, this is really hard. And she says, Dad, this is 1,000 times better than it was. And I didn't see that. And that was the most hurtful thing. And you go, oh my goodness. So some of the behind the closed doors, behind these doors, we have these sad stories or these painful stories or these torturers. And I don't care what brand of Christian you are, that's not a Christian thing. That's just not okay. So I tell the people, look, it won't evaporate, and there is no such thing like a flick of a switch. We have that conversion where there was switch was flipped You can do this and have a seismic change. But when domestic violence is present, it's sinister in that both sides are in some ways colluding it and protecting it. He's got his reasons because it's all about him. She's got her creating havoc or shame for the church or for the family. Yeah, that's. But seek it out. Talk to people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Peter. What a discussion. We've covered all the bases. Can you close with just telling us what is the gospel and why it's meaningful for you? And just before you do that, something you said earlier, do you know, is your son married to Melissa Jane? Is that a relative of yours?
Melissa Jane is my daughter.
Melissa's your daughter? Oh,
yes.
Wow. Because she was at college singing and did some recording.
Yeah.
Her voice is amazing.
And my son is married to Brittany Renner.
Oh, yes.
And she's also a singer.
Amazing singer from a very talented family.
And my son's a guitarist. You want to hear real angels, then you listen to the grandchildren. Annabelle, Elle.
Yeah.
You pay attention to Elle Stojanovic.
Yeah.
But then even there's another lower level with Layla and Indigo. They're just angels. It's just beautiful to see.
Isn't it funny? I wish I'd clicked to this at the start. I would have had a chat to you about it. And just something you'd said made me. I think you're Melissa's dad or related somehow.
And I rejoice. And I rejoice at this. And you go. That to me is engagement. There's socializing.
Yeah. There's the network.
Networking.
Yeah, I feel really bad because she invited me to. I feel bad because she invited me to do a bush dance for, I think, your granddaughter's birthday or something. And I had to wait to find out from a festival what the date was, and I didn't get back to her in time. And classic muso, unorganized. So apologize to her from me.
No. Look, your question, what is the gospel to me?
Yeah, let's close on this. What's the gospel and what is it to you?
For me, the gospel for me is that God is love and God cares and shun us. He looks for us and invites us into that relationship with him. And whoever I am, wherever I am, he's always got that welcoming door. And I think when I enter into that door and through that door, I have this beautiful rest. I'm rested. I don't feel lost. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of, the end times, whatever the end is, I just don't have anxiety. I just live life and look at things around me and just with thankfulness and say, you know what, I'm privileged actually to not live this kind of life. Other people don't see any of that beauty. And I look for beautiful things. That to me is the gospel.
Peter Stojanovic, this has been a great conversation and we must do it again sometime. Thank you everyone for watching all around the world and sticking with us on this 3 hours and 11 minutes conversation.
Sorry about that.
Hey, they're always 2.5 hours, 2:45. Bob Brinsmead to hit 4.5, and I think the record holder is Matthew Corpman at 5 hours. Hey, this is just conversation, relaxing, enjoying it.
Yes.
Until next time, and we'll see you later. Thank you very much, and everyone watching, we will see you next week. Bye for now.
All the best.